Thank you, Madam Clerk. So we are live, and I want to welcome everyone here to this evening and those that might be watching later to the Board of Police Commissioners for Halifax Regional Municipality regular meeting, August 7th, 2024. I also want to acknowledge that our meeting is here today in the Halifax Regional Municipality located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaty signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. At this point, I'd like to offer up if there are any announcements. I have a few, so I'll start to kick those off. I want to first acknowledge a loss of one of our commissioners' mom. Commissioner O'Malley lost his mom this week, and at a wonderful age of 91. She was a teacher, and she was also a counselor in Halifax North End and Ward 5. So spectacular woman who gave of herself in so many ways. And our condolences to you, Commissioner O'Malley, and your family as you journey through this and into the future. Thank you. I also want to welcome and congratulate Chief Don McLean as being appointed to the full designation of chief after having spent 8 months in the seat as an acting. I want to acknowledge that, we're wishing you well, and we wish you to carry on the work that you had committed to, and might be some more that we'll come up with here, or CAO. And just congratulations, and I hope your family are happy about that and will support you. Thank you. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. We duly noted. We could cut that one off. Um, I also want to let folks know a little bit of an update on the independent review. I just want you to all know that we are expecting that this month. As soon as we can get that out to the public, we will, but still a process to go through. Thank you. Are there any other community acknowledgements from any members? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes for June 17th and July 24th and August 6th of 2024. We have a motion moved by Commissioner Akindeju. Is there a seconder? Commissioner O'Malley. Is there any debate over those? Anything we need to talk about? No. I'll call for the question. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Madam Clerk, is there anything that we need to be aware of?
So there are no deletions, but we do have a few additions. We have, so just as you have seen earlier, the addition of the minutes for July 24th and August the 6th. We also have an addition for in-camera for the in-camera minutes of August the 6th, which will come under 12.1.
Thank you. Any from anyone else? No. So can we have a motion to approve the order of business as amended? Thank you very much, Commissioner Blackburn, and seconded by Commissioner Akindoju. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. All right. We have no business arising out of the minutes. We'll now call for a declaration of conflict of interest to our commissioners. No, seeing none, we can move forward from that. Consideration of deferred business. There is a deferred piece that I, as a member, would like to put forward. There's a bit of a two steps to this, and it's around the police transformation study. So it's 7.1. If I could ask my vice chair to take the chair from his role in his seat, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
For the present?
Yes.
Or on in the meeting?
Right now, just for this one. Okay, so we had a motion on the floor, and perhaps Josh can remind us of what that fully was, but it was around the police chiefs working together and identifying recommendations out of the MCC report and the transformation report that they would be able to work together on. And there we go. That's the motion that was put on the floor. And what I would like to do is rescind that. And I have a more directive and more appropriate motion. That one, I believe, when we talked about it, we had a sense that this was almost like too much. It was too broad, too open, and we needed the chiefs to drill down, but that would have been a significant task we were asking them to do that really could be more directive in a second, in an alternative motion. So you'll see in 7.1, that's the new one, correct? That's the original one. Okay. So the new one is up there. Thank you. I can't see it with my glasses on or off it. Okay. So we have to first deal with the first one, which is a rescission of the first one, which is that one. So yeah, it's a motion to withdraw. That's right. So I'd move that motion be withdrawn. Seconded by Commissioner Blackburn. Does anyone have any questions on this one? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Marty, you want to speak to it? Oh, yeah, shoot. Oh, I forgot. I'm not the, I'm not.
He's watching, he's sitting back watching it.
You're just laughing at me, right?
I'm laughing, not at you. Maybe with you.
Okay, I'm just gonna
Or
leave
perhaps
this.
for you.
You don't have to do a formal motion.
It's fine. I'll turn it over to the vice chair here to see how he wants to proceed.
Well, we can repeat all of what just happened, but we don't need to do that.
Okay, do we?
We require a comment from you, Mr. Solicitor.
I think all you need to do is ask the assembled members if they agree to withdrawal and you're done.
Assembled members, do you agree? Show of
Agree.
hands. Thank you.
Done.
That motion is withdrawn.
Thank
Chair,
you.
do you have another?
I
motion?
just want
Do
to
you have
say
another
now you
motion?
have a sense of what my kids go through all the time.
Do you
Oh,
have another motion?
I do have another motion and it's right there. That is, I would move that the board and the police commissioners, I have glasses that help me right here, but not right there. Okay, there you go. Motion that the Board of Police Commissioners for Halifax Regional Municipality directs the chief of the HRP and advise the officer in charge of the RCMP to provide updates to the board using the Joint Chiefs reporting template on local progress made against the themes identified by the Progress Monitoring Committee, PMC, following the release of each biannual PMC public update.
Is there a seconder for the chief's motion?
Thank you. And so, yes, and this one is, it's more sustainable and more, just a little more clear about how we could get them into each of the recommendations in a more structured way through the PMC, the Progress Monitoring Committee, that updates, and then we'll get the updates from our two chiefs working together.
Are there any comments or questions regarding clarity? Are we ready for the question?
Question?
All in favor?
Hi,
Contrary? Abstain? Motion's carried.
thank you. All right, so I'll take the chair again. Thank you, Vice Chair. Correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Does anyone have any of those? Or Madam Clerk, do we have anything to add there?
There are no correspondence or petitions received by the clerk's office.
Thank you. Anything from the members? Seeing none, we can move forward to petitions. Any petitions? No. Okay, and we have no presentations brought and information items brought forward. So we'll now move to reports and discussions. 10.1 from staff. And the title is Halifax Regional Police, Royal Canadian Mounted Police Chief Updates. So we'll start with, who did it first last time? I'm going to say Donnie did. So we're going to start with the new Chief McLean.
So we'll start with me.
Yeah, I've
You good?
shifted my
All right.
mind again.
It's all good. Good afternoon to the Chair Kent, members of the board, everyone else that's joining us today, whether here or online. First, I obviously want to say thank you to the board, obviously through the process, and thanks for showing your confidence in my abilities. And I am both honored and humbled to be here today. And before we begin, I also want to point out a few people. You've met Acting Deputy Matthews before. He's not new to the game, but the last time Acting Deputy Chief Dean Simmons wasn't here, he runs our administration division. So I have him here today. And I also want to make note that I have Marla McInnes with us, who's sitting behind Dean. She is our new manager of public relations and communications.
Oh, good.
She comes to us after 14 years with the province as a communications manager, and did some schooling at Dal and NSCC in Queens, and we're very looking forward to her expertise and helping me say what I need to say properly over the next little bit as we move forward. So anyway, thank you very much. To get into our updates, the first thing I want to speak to is obviously on July 27th, there was a tragic shooting event in Africville in relation to the reunion. Two groups apparently got into some sort of dispute and shots were fired. We know 5 people were injured, one significantly. We do continue to ask anyone who has any information to please come forward and provide that to us. Our integrated criminal investigation division has been very diligent in their work. It was a chaotic scene for the first responders. Certainly, identification of over close to 200 people that were at the scene in terms as the investigators moved through that, and significant work being done by the victim services team in terms of the community and the families and victims. I want to be clear that these senseless acts have no place in our community. I also want to be clear that that incident in no way is reflective of the spirit of Africville or the reunion, which has gone on for 4 decades. But I certainly stay on top of the investigation through Deputy Chief Andrews and the investigative team, and we know sometimes these things don't go as quickly as we like, but that is the nature sometimes of significant complex investigations. And certainly, last but not least, we certainly offer our thoughts and condolences to anyone who was injured or experienced any type of trauma from that significant event. Our 2025 cadet class, which is scheduled to start, I think, at the end of September. We are now into our security clearance reviews along with medical and psychological testing. I do want to take note and congratulate the team from marketing, recruiting, the ambassadors, HR, training, everyone for their efforts. It's taken a lot of time and dedication from our members across to prepare for our next cadet class, and I'm very looking forward to it. I also want to thank the board, obviously, for putting in place a staffing model that will allow us to have a sustained effort going forward in terms as we build on that. I also have 2 experienced police officers starting next week. They were a direct result of the marketing campaign we did with HRM to reach out across the country, and I look forward to that. And we will always continue to recruit through our experienced police officer program and looking at some other issues as well. From other major investigations, on July 18th, we charged 3 people in relation to a shooting that occurred in Dartmouth. Officer responded to shots fired, and in the investigation seized a shotgun, handgun, and ammunition. 3 people were charged with numerous firearms and weapons charges, and however, thankfully, no injuries as a result. And officers also in July laid weapons charges against 2 youth after separate incidents reported at a business in Bedford with a firearm. As well, on July 25th, investigators from the SES Special Enforcement Section of CID arrested a suspect, and as a result, seized over 3 kilograms of cocaine, a quantity of oxycodone, MDMA, and over $100,000 in cash. Obviously, significant work done in that specific works by our members. From a firearms perspective, we have seized or surrendered at 198 firearms this year, and and we're up to 14 shooting incidents across the HRP area of HRM. From a traffic perspective, HRP officers issued 948 summary offense tickets in July. 193 of those were for speeding, 57 for suspended or revoked driver's license, and 55 for distracted driving. There were also 27 charges laid for impaired operation of a motor vehicle and 11 suspensions issued. We did respond to 78 calls to report suspected driving, so we thank those from the community who call us to advise us of these particular things. And as well, this month actually does focus on impaired driving, and so we remind everyone to never drive while under the influence of drugs or alcohol. From a community perspective, August 1st was Emancipation Day, and it's a good time to reflect and acknowledge the enslavement of the people of African descent in Canada, particularly those from the African Nova Scotia community. In terms of that's an important moment. Just before the Pride Parade took place on the 20th, we had our inaugural Pride Barbecue, which was hosted by our Rainbow Internal Support Network, and was a wonderful opportunity for all our members to connect. In relation to that, I want to thank the members of the ISN for organizing the event, and I hope that becomes an annual tradition. I had the opportunity to speak at Camp Courage at the beginning of July, which was established by one of the Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency Captains, Andrew Esperanza, who I think deserves recognition. It's a camp that encourages young women and gender diverse youth to look at careers as first responders and spend the week amongst the first responder community, fire, police, RCMP, and EHS. And it was a really good opportunity to see those young faces in the crowd that were clearly dedicated and clearly excited to be there. And obviously, I think that's a very wonderful program. This is obviously a busy week as we move into the Canadian Association of Police Governance, which starts on Friday. So we're going to welcome all the delegates from across the country coming to Halifax to speak about police governance and civilian governance and from that perspective. And as well, I will be hosting the chiefs and staff from across the country at the CACP convention, which starts on Sunday now as well, in terms of, so Halifax Regional Police are very proud to support this event, and we look forward to seeing our colleagues from across the country. And it appears the Storm Debbie is going to be somewhat respectful to the people that come here in the next little bit and take a more northerly route. So everyone should enjoy Halifax, and that's it for my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions for the Chief at this time? Commissioner Giles?
Chief, and I'm delighted to say that without feeling that I have to use the word acting in front of it. So congratulations. I was proud to have been involved in the process. It was an excellent process, and I'm convinced that our choice was an excellent choice. I wish you well always in your endeavors in the years ahead. Last week, Judge Alonzo Wright of the Provincial Court, and Judge Wright is known personally to many of us as very much a law and order person who spent his career as a Crown prosecutor and as head of CERT before he became a judge a year or so ago, handed down a decision in a case called Cromwell, in which he stayed 20 serious criminal charges because of a strip search, which he described variously as outrageous, reprehensible, and modifiers of that sort. This is the second time in 4 or 5 years when members of the force have been rebuked by judges over strip searches. And there seems to be some kind of either ignorance of or disinclination to pay attention to the Supreme Court decision from about 20 years ago in a case called Golden, which set out the template for strip searches. Is that something which is on the department's radar from a training perspective or perhaps a retraining perspective?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I am familiar with that case as well. And also, I'm very familiar with Alonzo. He's a friend of mine for many years. Yes, so that is something that was brought to my attention. It is something that we are currently reviewing in terms of if there's a deficiency in policy, or if there's a deficiency in terms of following the policy in terms of either way, but that is something that is on our radar in terms of something that we will be looking at.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Akindoshu?
Thank you, Chair, and again, congratulations to you. I was reading through the biannual criminal statistics report, actually probably through the CAO, and it actually provides a bit of data for us. If you look at the attachment, page 1, talking specifically concerning property, there's a 20.12% increase in theft. We're here to address community issues and problems, especially we've continued to talk about the issue of theft to motor vehicles, which increased by 55%, and theft under 5,000, which also increased by 13.5%. Theft over 5,000 increased by 23%. Can you please provide some details as regards to how we can curb this and reduce this and make people's life a little bit more comfortable? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Certainly, we have seen over the last an upward trend in relation to property-related crime for specifically since COVID for various reasons. Certainly, theft under shoplifting crimes have gone up significantly that are related to a lot of issues within the community. And certainly, it's something that we continue to look at on a national basis. Theft of vehicles has become a bit of a national issue. Although I will say that we still don't have the issues that they're experiencing in Upper Canada in terms of, and particularly around the violence and some of the financial aspect of vehicle theft that's occurring elsewhere. In terms of the majority of vehicles that are stolen in our jurisdiction are recovered a short time later. In terms of it's more of a crime of convenience than it is one of market financial gain in terms of vehicles being shipped off elsewhere and stuff like that. But it is something that is on I actually went to the summit in Peel this year where we talked about it because as CBSA started looking at doing some crackdowns on some of the ports within Canada, particularly Montreal and some of those areas in terms of what impact it would have on Halifax. So while we haven't seen that yet, it's something we're mindful of and it's something that we're engaged with our policing partners across the nation in terms of trying to address. There's no easy answer to some of the theft issues in terms of some of which are crimes of opportunity. We certainly see, it's not uncommon for us to put out notices around specific frauds targeting seniors and those type of things in terms of on a somewhat regular basis now in terms of so that's a growing trend that we all need to be mindful of and certainly education plays a huge role in that. But certainly particularly like in some of our downtown areas in terms of working with our community response officers and divisional commanders around providing, efforts around retail theft and those sort of things which really are the ones that are driving up some of these numbers. That it like I say, there's no easy answer to it. It's going to require some concerted efforts from all constituencies, whether it's policing, whether it's courts, and whether it's certainly the industry itself in terms of being able to deal with some of these matters. But certainly you're correct in terms of that's where we see our increase in crime numbers in terms of relative. The violent crime numbers actually have reduced to a certain degree, but those are the ones that are still of, obviously catches the community eye, but certainly recognizing that quality of life issues around thefts in the community are something that's very important.
If I can have a follow-up. I belong to Community Ride in Clayton Park, and actually I've in time ignored some of because we've had car theft and break into homes frequently in the past. But looking at these statistics, it seems they are right. And the question they are asking is, these things happen within certain periods of the day, probably at night, very late in the night. And the simple question is that they do not, as before, see police patrols, which could easily deter this. Their fear, therefore, is that if this continues, these guys will become comfortable, they will break into homes, and it would lead to harming people who would want to stop them. So I think I want to just bring this up and see, especially because, not because I live in Cleveland Park, but that area is totally now, they do not see the police around anymore. Maybe some moments later in the night will probably deter this kind of people to avoid them building that confidence to continue to do what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions on that, we'll now ask Chief Christie.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, folks present in the room and online. Let me echo your congratulations for Chief Don McLean. It's a great moment when Don was sworn in as the interim chief, and I hope there's the same size cake, Don, when you get the formal adoption or whatever next steps is. But thank you for all the support and the ongoing partnership between HRP and RCMP, and look forward to your leadership. And Dennis and all of us are celebrating with you. Just in recognition that we will be speaking on the Tantallon wildfires, I'll just sort of keep this quite short. Couple of strategic things that the board may be interested in. We're in the final stages of, pardon me, hiring the RCMP superintendent. So I expect somewhere in the next 6 to 8 weeks, we'll have the name of the official RCMP superintendent. And I just want to acknowledge Inspector Don Moser behind me, who's acting in that position. The superintendent is essential, I think, to the PricewaterhouseCoopers transformational capacity and the ability of the senior management teams to sort of meet and strategically deconflict things. So while we've had Don in that position, we'll see through proper process who the incumbent is finalized, but that should be done within the next 4 to 6 weeks is my expectation. Similarly, another change to the command team is the new Staff Sergeant Major position, and that too is in the final stages. Not exactly sure, but that will lead me into point 3, is that we'll be having a developmental day in Oak Island towards the latter part of September, and we're hoping to have the names for both new leaders basically either early arrived and fly down and participate or be present. But employee development is critical. So this year's event will also have that ceremonial dinner that has occurred in the past, and the theme is both wellness for employees, given the load that are on employees today, resiliency, and also sort of a operational piece following that, which is, what are the priorities of moving forward and so on within Halifax Regional Detachment. So that initiative is being led underneath Inspector Jeff Mitchell, who's also here today. And again, it's a significant priority of us to make sure we're investing in employees. Similarly, we deployed a member to BC about 3 weeks ago, intimate partner violence with the support of the police board and the municipality. We're getting close to being able to operationalize and begin to stand up that specialized support section. So we were pleased to send Corporal Jessica Welke to British Columbia, who spent a couple days with Saanich Police Department, might be North Saanich, but they have a sort of a model that oversees multiple geographies. But what's critical about that model is the fact that offenders move between jurisdictions. So in that model, they also have sort of victim services or enhanced engagement with the Crown. So how do we, again, as we look towards leaning in and operationalizing that position towards November, how do we make sure we learn from the best practices of others around victimization of intimate partner violence? Just a couple other high points. The team has been very engaged with a sudden death of 2 persons that were found at or near Sable Island that came ashore in a lifeboat. And with the support of CID and HRP members and RCMP members, the command team through the summer has been working with everyone from the coroner's office to the Transportation Safety Board to make sure that that investigation progresses, the families treated and engaged with the appropriate communication. So I just want to acknowledge that was a significant lift for the team. My understanding is folks from CID, including HRP member actually traveled to Sable Island. So again, another, outstanding lift by that CID team. There's been a number of missing persons call where GSAR has been deployed. And again, I just want to acknowledge the civilian support for ground search and rescue. It always seems to be a time in the summer that more people are outside enjoying, but a number of the calls are actually about youth. Youth, that may be aid or enhanced risk, and being able to tap into that team. And it was such a moment during NATO parade to see at least one of the GSAR teams at NATO Day, and the capacity and specialization that that team is bringing, and the expertise is certainly is a proud moment for me as a police officer. So again, I just want to acknowledge GSAR as well as the members for their quick response. Lastly, in the interest of time, there was a joint enforcement effort of patrols on Grand Lake recently around boating. Department of Fisheries, Coast Guard, there's a number of folks that all came together to make that happen. Fisheries and Oceans, Natural Resources, DNR. There's a high percentage of people that were stopped that failed the roadside screening device. And it is a sober reminder that there are many boating fatalities that happen in the country, just like impaired driving. And so while our presence may not be as frequent or as common as perhaps we would like given capacity, it is a deterrent, a reminder that whether you're drinking and driving in a car or you're drinking and driving in a boat, there are still terrible outcomes that occur. And again, we ask for the public's cooperation if they see folks under the influence of alcohol to report it. And we have the mechanisms and tools to deploy people to interface and make arrests where necessary. So upwards of 40 warnings for not having registration of the pleasure craft, upwards of 4 summary offense tickets for the Liquor Act, 3 warnings under the Wildlife Act, et cetera, and 80% of the breath samples taken screened positive for alcohol. So it's just something to we ask the public support on. And I will also note, as Chief McLean, that's a great phrase, Chief McLean, that on Camp Courage, we had several members, and Constable Trudy Pike, some of you know, who's always a passionate engagement with community. She was there supporting that event, and just NATO Day, the Halifax Regional Police just did a remarkable job of coordinating that event on NATO Day. So well done to your members, et cetera. Subject to any questions, Chair, that's the update pending the after action fire review.
Thank you very much, Chief. Are there any questions from members? No? Well, thank you very much. And I want to echo your salute to Camp Courage, Andreas Spirelli. She's a force to be reckoned with. She is a house on fire in a good way, I should say. She's just, energetic, enthusiastic, and everyone that's there feels it. And I think they embrace that, include not only the participants, but all of the folks that, that you've sent there. So I know that she's getting some requests from other parts of the country now. So I think she is celebrated often, but I think it's worth saying next time anyone sees her to acknowledge that even further, because it really is tremendous if you've ever had a chance to see it in action. So thank you. All right. So we're now moving on to 10.2.1, and this is the off-duty and extra-duty employment policy. I think that I know Josh Bates will be speaking to this. And Josh, I think this is one outcome from the policy committee. Is that one of the ones that was reviewed there, or?
Yes,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
one of the first policies
Yeah.
that was asked to review.
Great, thank you. Okay, you want to take the floor and
Okay, yeah,
give
thank you,
us some
Chair.
verbal remarks?
So as the Chair mentioned, off-duty and extra-duty were 2 of the first policies the board asked me to review. And I'll also point out that under Section 56 of the Police Act, these are, in fact, the only 2 policies that the board is actually required to have. The current policy in the policy manual essentially states that HRP's current policies are endorsed by the board. So there are 2 separate policies that are before you today, off-duty and extra-duty. So I'll start by commenting on extra duty. The HR study received by the board last year found that the number of extra duty hours worked nearly doubled between 2021 and 2022. And one of the study's recommendations is to look at the total amount of time worked by sworn officers, including extra duty, to determine if there's a correlation between time worked, sick leave, and available staff resources. So the implication here is that a refreshed extra duty policy could have a positive impact on available staff resources. So I'll just pause here to point out that the policy before you today is a proposed board policy, not HRP policy. And the purpose of a board policy is to provide high-level direction to the chief on what principles the board would like to see in HRP's refreshed policies. So one of the principles outlined in the extra duty policy before you is to include criteria to assess whether requests for extra duty deployment actually require a police presence. I did a jurisdictional scan, and this is common in other jurisdictions, but it is not present in HRP's current policy. The proposed policy also speaks to training and briefings related to extra duty public understanding about the role of extra duty policing, consideration for the mental and physical well-being of officers when scheduling extra duty, and reporting requirements for the chief. And one of the reporting requirements is a client breakdown of extra duty assignments, including those related to traffic control. And this is because we know that traffic control has been a significant portion of extra duty deployment in other jurisdictions. So one of the recommendations in the report is for the board to request the mayor to request the province to appoint special constables who would be able to provide traffic direction. Moving on to off-duty, the existing HRP policy states that all off-duty employment must be authorized by the chief. The proposed policy also recommends including a line in HRP's policy that prohibits the use of HRP property toward off-duty employment. And also, similar to extra duty, there are reporting requirements for the chief. The last thing I'll say is that HRP staff have been consulted in producing the draft policy before you and are broadly supportive of the proposed language. Next steps would include inviting public comment on the draft policy through the board's website. And with that, I'd welcome your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we debate that, we should get that motion on the floor. And I'm going to defer to Commissioner Giles, who is a member of the policy committee.
I'm happy to read the motion. We can perhaps put it up as well. For anybody following on in the agenda, this is on page 4 at the middle of the page under heading 10.2 staff and the subheading 10.2.1 off-duty and extra-duty employment policy motion. The motion is as follows, and it's in 2 parts. That the Board of Police Commissioners for the Halifax Regional Municipality, 1, adopt in principle, subject to a period of public comment, the revised extra-duty and off-duty policies for inclusion in the Board of Police Commissioners Policy Manual, as outlined in Attachment 1 of this report. And 2, recommend that Regional Council request the Mayor to write a letter to the Minister of Justice, that would be the Provincial Minister of Justice, to consider the appointment of trained municipal staff as special constables to provide traffic direction at special events. Do you have a seconder?
Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Commissioner Blackburn. So these are relatively distinct motions. We might want to consider breaking them out for a vote. So at this stage, I'd like to open the floor to commissioners who, actually we'll start with Commissioner Giles if you want to offer any comments at this point, and then you could close as well.
First off, I don't think anybody struggles with the difference between extra duty and off duty. But as I read the draft policy, especially under the criteria for off duty employment, it seems that there won't be any pursuant to this policy. Is that correct?
Sir, there won't be what?
Any off duty employment?
Any off-duty employment? No, so that the chief could, I'm sure, speak to this, but off-duty employment is allowed if it is permitted by the chief. So I believe the language is that all off-duty employment is prohibited unless otherwise authorized by the chief.
But then there are other criteria. The chief officer will prohibit sworn members from being in uniform while engaged in off-duty employment. That doesn't seem to be discretionary.
So they could in theory be engaged in off-duty employment, not in uniform. They just can't use their,
And Chief, perhaps better to you, how would that affect where we see uniformed police officers, armed police officers in places like Sobeys and Superstore and Nova Scotia Liquor Commission outlets, et cetera?
Those are extra duty positions. Those are not off-duty positions. That's extra duty.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Chief McLean, did you have anything you want to offer
So,
in the context of the whole thing?
yes, so I think for the most part, like I say, and our staff has gone through some of this, or all of this, is that this formalizes things that we already do anyhow, that may not be actually written in the policy, but there's always an assessment done of what jobs that come in and whether, that is, so this formalizes some of those things. Obviously, it provides more reporting requirements, which is fine. If that's what the board wants, then that's fine, I think. But I think one of the reporting requirements, particularly in the off-duty piece, that I think needs a little bit more discussion around is 11B, which says an estimate of the total number of off-duty hours worked in the previous fiscal year based on applications received. I just don't know how that's actually achievable in terms of people on their off-duty hours don't have a requirement to report as to what they do on their off-duty hours. No different than if someone wanted to go to the gym for 27 hours of the, for the, like, I just don't know how that would be. I just don't think it would be actually reflective in any way. I get that it's an estimate, but let's say there's 10 off-duty things that I authorize. There's no way of me, or no mechanism that would be able to say, I now instruct you to tell me what you do on your off-duty hours in terms of report back, or anything that would be even reasonably reflective of an accuracy in relation to that. I can certainly tell you how many, the other ones that, how many are approved and the scope and all that, but in terms of actually being able to estimate that, I don't think is actually physically achievable.
Okay.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah.
I just want to get it clear.
Can you note the place in the report?
Yeah, so it's in the off-duty, policy, the reporting requirements, which is the last paragraph. 11, the chief officer will annually report to the board the following information. B is an estimate of the total number of off-duty hours worked in the previous fiscal year based on applications received. I just don't know how that would be actually achievable based on either the number of applications that come in, or in terms, like I say, these are people's off-duty hours in terms of I have no control over their reporting requirement. I just don't see how that's achievable.
Yes. So that requirement should be read in tandem with clause 10, which states that when an application is received by the chief for off-duty
Josh,
employment,
Josh, could we just wait until we get it so we can
There we
refer
are,
everybody
okay.
to it? There you go.
Okay, so we're talking about 18B,
18A.
extra duty, no,
Oh,
No, it's 11.
yeah, 11B.
it's number 11.
I think you're in the wrong policy. This is the wrong policy. Yeah, so this is strictly in relation to off-duty.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we're trying to get to. So where is it again?
It's in the last paragraph, reporting requirements.
Of, yeah. Okay. Okay,
we're good? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so that reporting, the idea behind that reporting requirement is that it be read in tandem with number 10, if you want to scroll up, which states that when an application is received by the chief for off-duty employment, it include an estimate of the anticipated number of hours per week that the member will be engaged in off-duty employment. So for example, if a member wants to do, lawn care for 10 hours a week, that would be included in the application, and then you would add that, 10 hours times 52 weeks a year. So it would be very rough. I take the chief's point that we can't control what officers are doing in their spare time, but they do. The fact of the matter is that they do need to have off-duty employment authorized. So the suggestion here is that that authorization include an estimate of the hours that are going to be worked.
Okay, so just need to know, is that an accurate description of what you're doing with off-duty hours? Are you collecting that?
No. Not presently, no.
Can I ask a question?
So we got two commissioners. Commissioner Blackburn's first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just to follow up on the off-duty conversation here. So that needs permission from you before. If they're off-duty, are they able to wear full uniform?
No, that's reflective. These are people or individuals that they may own a business. They may do, this has
Okay.
nothing to do with police. And in fact, specific things related to around security systems, those things are actually prohibited
Okay.
in terms of this policy. But these, not unlike the fire department that has, this is people that may have other, interests that are outside of.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And just to circle back on, Josh, you were saying that extra duty, the hours doubled between 2021 and 2022. We're to assume that's a COVID jump?
I think we have the executive director of HR here who could perhaps speak to some of that as well. But I think like one of the reasons that it jumped is that the off-duty rate increased from 1.5
okay.
to 2, to double, right? And,
Yeah.
and I believe that there are ongoing collective bargaining now for the next collective agreement.
Okay.
So
So that may have worked into it as well.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would be surprised if that was a factor.
Okay, yeah, that's, my mind automatically went to COVID jump. And just finally, more of a clarification for the folks watching at home than anything else. The fact that we need to have uniformed sworn police officers as part of traffic control for things like parades and whatnot, that is actually mandated through the Motor Vehicle Act, if I'm not mistaken. So that's why we're going to, or it's proposed that we reach out to the province and ask that they make those changes. I know that the Motor Vehicle Act is something that has been, the province has been working on now for the last, I'm sure, a dozen years and then some. And it's going to be another few years before it actually comes to fruition. But certainly, at council, we've recognized that special constables could provide a lot of that service at events like parades. So definitely in support of that, but just certainly wanted to make it clear to the folks at home that it's not our choice to have uniformed police officers at every street corner for parades and other special events. It's something that's mandated under the Motor Vehicle Act, and hopefully we'll be given permission to allow special constables to do this work. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
I'm going to go to Commissioner Akindoju first,
Thank you,
and
Chair.
then Commissioner O'Malley.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is just simply clarification. Is there any difference between off-duty and in vacation? When you say off-duty, does it mean vacation? Can it be, is it similar to a police officer being on vacation? That's one.
So off duty.
Oh, sorry, what's the difference between off-duty and being on vacation?
So off duty is just that. It means you're not at work. It's like, so when I leave here today and I go home, I'm off duty, although it never seems like I'm off duty, but the reality is I'm off duty. So the members that work, outside of their scheduled hours are off duty. Like that's their own free time to do with as they please.
So my second follow-up question is off-duty time paid time.
Not by the municipality or the organization. if they're engaged in a business or something like they could be paid for whatever that may be. Like the
That's fine.
Yeah.
Finally, how would you have control of an unpaid time of an individual? Or when he's in vacation, how do we have a control of that? How do you have a control?
the only control I have is authorizing what off-duty jobs members may do. So there are certain things. So if someone said, my off-duty job is I want to be a bouncer down at one of the liquor establishments, my answer would be no. Or if you wanted to be a private security guard on you, my answer would be no. But if you wanted to mow lawns, for instance, as was suggested, although I don't know of anyone who actually does that, but if that's what you wanted to do, then yes, that is something you could
Sorry,
do.
I said it was last question, but I have
Yeah.
one more. Would that fall under your professional ethics to disclose? Or why do I have, as a police officer, disclose what I'm doing to you as a chief, my vacation or my off duty?
Yeah, no, so this, like I said, this is specifically for other jobs that you may have that potentially may have a conflict with what you do, which is why the authorization needs to come through the chief's office. Like the majority of extra off-duty job requests that come through me, I approve simply because there's no reason not to. I think people know, this has been around for a long time in terms of our organization. People know what jobs that they can and cannot do for the most part. Like they're clearly they're not contentious. They're not controversial type positions for the most part. Lots of them are people that have their own businesses related sometimes as to whatever that may be in terms of certain different businesses or some of our officers actually have a business where they provide some of those glow event bouncy castle things for events and stuff like that, right? So those are the type of things that speak to off-duty employment. Nothing to do with being in uniform, nothing to do with security. All that is regulated through the extra duty policy, which is regulated through the department, and in terms of is regulated as part of your actual job because you're subject to the Police Act and all those other things.
Thank you, Chief. The CAO would like to add to the conversation.
Thank you. Just to add a little bit more information for Commissioner Akindoju, the off-duty policy is not unlike other employment policies applicable to municipal employees or Halifax Water employees with respect to outside employment. And it's driven largely by code of conduct related concerns around preventing employees from taking pursuits outside work that may create reputational risk or interfere with the primary loyalty that's owed to your primary employer. And it would be very common for other business units, Halifax Water or HRM, if somebody was looking to do something outside to go talk to their supervisor or their director, fill out a form documenting, I want to go do X, and then it would be assessed to see whether it creates any conflict or reputational risk and be approved or not on that basis.
Thank you very much. I understand clearly the issue of the need for the approval. And that was why I said, does it have to do anything to do with professional ethics? As an accountant, there are certain things I can do and I cannot do, even in my house, my private conditions. So as a police, there will be some certain things in your private times that you shouldn't be allowed to do. So I understand that clearly. But the issue of the accountability of what is done during that time is what is not clear to me. I would think that you can hold individuals based on ethics and what they do or what they don't do, but you cannot hold them if it's within ethics on how long they do them or how they do them. So I think I need clarity on that, but maybe not today, but just say that I think it's not, the extra duty is for me more relevant than the off duty. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Malley.
Thank you. I just had a point of clarification, just related to off-duty. If someone was to become injured in their off-duty job, um, would they have a code of conduct duty to say that I was, injured, not while at work, but in an off-duty role and capacity? And what does that do in terms of the sick time? Could they come back and say, well, I'm unavailable to work and it happened in an off-duty role?
I mean, to the commissioner, I play basketball.
Yeah.
I could injure myself playing basketball,
I understand that.
right? And in terms of, that would not be a non-duty, it should not be compensable by
Yeah.
HRM in any way, shape or form. But I may not be able to come to work for it. In fact, I blew up my knee playing basketball 20 years ago now, in terms of where I needed to take time off.
Yeah.
That would follow the exact same script in terms of
Right.
how that would play out.
Britt, Director of HR, is there anything further you want to add to that?
Thank you to the Chair. Britt Wilson, Executive Director of HR, through you to the
Yep.
Councillor, or Commissioner. I think the Chief covered almost everything about it. The one aspect would be if the person were to be injured while doing other work, they could be covered under workers' compensation if they were covered under that program, and that's where their benefits would come from. If they were to attempt to make a claim with our workers' compensation, there would be investigation and conversation about when they were at work and what happened. So that's sort of just the clarification of the mechanics of it.
Great. No, and that's exactly what I was trying to get at. Thank you.
Commissioner Giles, are you rounding out and closing the debate? Because if you are, I would like to ask some questions.
I'm not. I have my own question of clarification.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
A question of clarification, right?
Well,
Leave your closing remarks to closing, if you
Appreciate
will,
that.
please.
I know we're only adopting in principle a policy subject to a period of public commentary, but it seems to me that we're gaining our intelligence of the full length and breadth of the policy kind of on the fly. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't be more prudent to delay this motion until such time as some of the clarifications can be better fleshed out. I'm not saying that they haven't been fleshed out to some degree, but when people are fleshing things out on the fly, it's probably not as accurate and as fulsome as it might otherwise be.
So if that's a motion to defer, that then ends any debate, period. There's nothing further.
Just clarify if it's a motion.
So I just need to clarify if it's a motion to defer, or if you could do that in your closing, that way I could have a chance to speak or not. Or if you'd like to put a motion on to defer now, you can do that.
My preference would be to defer the discussion until we can have a more fulsome one on the basis of a better rounded out policy.
Okay, is there a seconder? There's no debate on this. I don't think, is there? Debate on it. Okay, so there's a motion to defer and a seconder to defer. There isn't normally a debate, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Thank you. And do we want to defer to a definite date? Is that too late?
Could, or you could defer with some directions too.
Defer with the direction.
Commissioner Giles wants to give some directions to speak to it. So
Looking for a time?
I'm looking for a time, and do you have any further instruction? Do we have any further sort of direction for our staff, the why of deferral?
I mean, I think.
I mean, the cart's out of the horse, we've already voted,
I
but
think that has to be cultivated. I wouldn't want to stake my flag in the ground now on a time period. We don't have.
Okay,
we don't have another meeting this month.
but just help clarify the why. What is it you're looking for in to defer to do what?
Well, if you're looking at, if you look at the reporting requirements under 11, you see some kind of nebulous terminology that people have been struggling to define and flesh out. That would be a good starting point. I'm not suggesting that's the only starting point, but that would be a good one.
Okay. Okay. Now moving to 10.2.2, the 2023 Talon wildfires, RCMP, HRG, after action response presentation, please. Chief Superintendent Christie, and maybe Don Mosier. Thank you.
Chair, with your permission, I'd like to invite Bill Moore to join us at the table,
Yeah,
given the
please.
fact that it was
Thank you.
quite an interagency response. For the benefit of the board, Inspector Don Moser will take us through kind of the spectrum of his after-action fire review. I'll leave the details to him and make some comments at the end, but today we see in the news locations like Jasper. We see in the locations that wildfires continue to be such a high risk, high impact to our communities. And while I'm not a climate scientist, it does speak to the changing nature of how we respond in increasingly populated jurisdiction. Don was not part of the initial response. Don was identified because he is a little bit more removed and therefore is a little bit more sort of from a sense of integrity to the report, was coming in more after. Now he did certainly have some exposure to the event, but he wasn't sort of managing the event. Therefore, it is in the truest sense a lessons learned exercise. And he'll talk us through the amount of time, energy, and effort to consult with multiple stakeholders. And I'm very open to Executive Director Moore and the CAO and many folks who are in leadership positions around there. So again, if we get into questions towards the end, I'm happy to have the table respond at any time to who's best positioned to said questions. Over to Don Moser.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. It's always a privilege to speak to you, Chair, and the Commission to help inform the efforts in and around sort of a collaborative, collective approach to public safety. So my task here today, the good Chief there has asked that I move through and just give a high level sort of overview of the work that I've done since I've landed sort of in this acting role of the Senior Operations Officer. And I come with a bit of a background in in emergency management with some ICS training and some incident command roles in and around the emergency management world and some of the not only the HRP but the RCMP responses. So I'll move forward with this, but I'm going to move forward at a pace hopefully that will be amenable to the Commission. But if you have questions or concerns along the way, please slow me down. So the background, as you know, probably this room would be well acquainted with what's taken place last year. Unprecedented level of wildfires in May of 2023, but specifically impacted the Upper Tantallon area. Although Nova Scotia at that time was also concurrently dealing with what is deemed to be the largest area mass fire in southwest Nova, Tantallon was specifically impacted in a very unique way because of its concentration of population. The nature and complexity of the fires in Tantallon required a multi-agency response, and unfortunately, the consequence of those fires was a significant amount of property damage and losses to structures out there, and an impact on people's lives. In the immediacy of that particular event, localized access and travel restrictions we know were put in place to try to maintain public safety. North of about 16,000 people were displaced, and many for up to 12 days. Response was led primarily by the Department of Natural Resources and Renewals and Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency as the lead agencies, and we provided a direct supporting part to that response effort. So my purpose when I landed and mandated by Chief Superintendent was to review Halifax Regional Detachment's support role and understand if we did what we were expected to do of ourselves and by others. And really, this whole exercise of the after action review was to demonstrate, continuous improvement in our not only our response capabilities by identifying, where we did well, and of course where areas where we would require or be prudent to show improvement. And those key pieces there, one, to enhance our capabilities to sort of move through that coordinated emergency response world, that collective response, but to validate our the cross organization, that public safety ecosystem, a signals check there to see how we did with not only how we communicated with them, but how we also worked with them. So the methodology for that action after review, this isn't a Don Moser personal secret on how these things are done. There's a very standard, effective way to approach these types of after action reviews. And it was done through direct engagement sessions that were crafted, and then that work was initialized by Inspector Addie McCallum, and I sort of picked up where he sort of ended with that, and I was quite pleased to be able to do that. But we did pointed interviews and sessions with not only our HRM staff, or excuse me, our RCMP staff, and that's all categories of employees, by the way. That's not only our police officers, but our public servants as well that played a role making sure that we were doing what we needed to do on those days, but also our external stakeholders. And those engagement sessions, what we mined out of that from information and feedback, those directly informed the recommendations, which you're about to hear about. So used that direct feedback, correlated that, applied sort of a SWOT model, if you're familiar with that, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats model of analysis to identify those common themes and similarities that would then indicate trends that way. So in my work, for something to be considered a key finding, that had to be supported directly by observations and feedback in order to validate what was going to happen. So there needed to be that analysis and validation piece on that. So each recommendation, there was a recommendation that came out of each key finding. So the functional themes, as you'll see, they sort of fit into 4 different buckets. So in and around our emergency response there, but whether it was resource management, training and exercising, information management, or business continuity, were the main buckets that the themes developed from that feedback. So I'll move quickly into the findings. So what we identified is what we call our strengths, and I would say I beg your appreciation that I've condensed those down to sentences, but they could be pulled apart and I have lots of context to them. But there really was a demonstration of expedited, effective problem solving and decision making, and primarily at the front end of that response in making sure the evacuation happened. And I'll remind everybody, there was no loss of life. That isn't on HRD by itself. That was because of the collective efforts, but we played a part in making sure that happened in those early chaotic, and they really truly were chaotic hours of that response, to make sure that those effective assessment of what was going on, to make sure people were safe, and then get them where they needed to be, which was out of the danger zone. So next was the high level of multi-agency coordination collaboration, and that was really talked about this being a multi-agency response, that ability to connect in with our partners and then work with them and communicate with them to help inform the decision making and work within a system. The feedback from our partners was that was well done. It's not a place you arrive; it's a place that you keep tending and make sure that you're nurturing those relationships and those communication pathways there. So, and we worked very effectively with our partners. It was a very certainly very collaborative efforts that way. HRD's flexibility, the adaptability, and the teamwork within the detachment itself, the resources that we amassed to address that, really was one of our strengths. And the backdrop to this rapidly changing environment, very chaotic circumstances, and as that smoothed out along the way, but without the ability to adapt, and thank goodness we have good people that are well trained and that can come together, work very effectively together to sort of navigate those chaotic moments and then into a protracted response, was really a strength for us. The extraordinary professionalism and resiliency of the employees was really is very humbling actually, to see how things were sort of implemented and how they were operationalized at the front line. It was really, really is a testament to the good people. The working partnerships, the working relationships with our partners was strengthened. And that was, I'll use for example, fire, for example. A great relationship with fire, certainly going into that. But I would say coming out of that it was truly, it was an effective, really strong partnerships coming out of that with public safety, with that team in there, the ability to recognize our opportunities to keep working together, a part of that public safety ecosystem. I would say the lemonade from Lemons, right? Terrible incident, but it was an opportunity for us to sort of move forward with some of those great partnerships. The motivation to keep doing better. Leadership and subject matter expertise was prevalent. Some great leadership demonstrated by our frontline folks and our command team in making sure that we were very effective and we were always, adequately serving the tasks that were at hand that way. And the subject matter expertise, from different boxes, different lenses, whether it was legal services, whether it was our police dog services, really were kind of those blue sky moments in there that added a lot of value to that response to make sure folks were safe. The effective mobilization of police officers and employees, that ability to recognize what was needed, adapt. I call it shuffling the deck sometimes to make sure we had the people that we needed where we needed them and when they were needed the most. That ability to do that I think is a testament to the supervisory and the command teams that were involved to make sure we were able to do that. And we were able to sustain that protracted response in support of the larger fire efforts, which I think was, quite proud of the team on that one. Review of Halifax Regional Detachment's emergency operations plan, our emergency plan, our blueprint for how we respond to emergency events, not critical events, but emergency events. This is an opportunity now for us to go back and make sure that is still relevant. The chief talked about the trends right now with the environment and the different threats now, and the threat picture is definitely changing for all of us. And to make sure that we're staying up and staying relevant, and we understand with our environment, and that we have a plan to approach those, this is very important. That work's underway. Interoperability with HRP and Halifax Regional Fire. Very effective at the front end, especially when we were working through the chaos of evacuations that way there. Without that really effective interoperability, we wouldn't have been able to manage that together to get people where they needed to be. Nothing. None of those things can be perfect. It's chaos, but those relationships were very strong and very collaborative, and we were able to move through that successfully with no loss of life. Last few strengths: identification, mitigation of a lack of respiratory protection policy has spurred positive change. It's hard to be prepared for everything all the time, and especially in policing, what's thrown at us. In this particular case, wildfires, you can imagine that very austere environment of smoke and heat and everything else that's going on. This event has caused the RCM to go back and look and make sure that we have a policy to protect our people, respirators, things like that, make sure they're fit, tested properly. And that's actually permeated the entire organization. So it's had a positive influence actually nationally. So when you talk about the backdrop of things like Jasper and those places, they're all better because of how we responded, adapted to those things here. So that's a blue sky moment there that hopefully we're learning. You may have heard about some very innovative technology. Some of us refer to it as ATAC, but it's called an Android team awareness kit. It's an FBI tool. It's really a situational awareness tool that's loaded on the phones, but that allowed us to give very immediate situational awareness to where our resources were at. Not sitting in cars, but when people are outside of their vehicles, that allows us to do, be more effective at things like command and control, because we know where our resources are at and we can keep them safe and keep them on task and where they need to be in the moment. The last thing I'll speak to is the expertise and responsiveness of our legal services. Referred to it a little bit earlier, but our legal services team within the RCMP was very responsive to make sure we understood when certain questions had come up with respect to evacuation and then return to people's homes, and then denying people access to certain areas, making sure our folks understood their authorities, right, grounded in legislation, and so that we were always making sure that we were within the bounds of what we were doing. And that also plays part, making sure the public understands the part we play and why. So very important. They were extremely responsive. And in fact, out of that became I would call it a booklet or a toolkit for our officers. But I believe has a national lens there now that actually helps during these crisis response, these emergency responses, to understand your authorities, and it's localized. It can be made to be localized as well. So great work from our legal services team that way. All said, all great for me to talk about all the blue sky moments, but really the work is really grounded in very important things, which is how we can improve. And there are certainly lots of areas for us to improve. And you'll hear me talk a bit about the ICS stuff, so that's sort of peppered through here. But in the different buckets I talked about, those areas of response, one is resource management. Where can we do better? Our community action response team, our CART team, I think we could play a very strong or a stronger role in how we connect in with our diverse communities during emergency responses. So I think making sure that that anchor point is there when our communities are impacted, especially our diverse communities can be particularly disadvantaged during emergencies, that we're connected in and that we're understanding their needs and supporting them is going to be super important going forward. I think we can certainly get better than that. Our victim services program in Halifax Regional Detachment, I think this is an opportunity to go back and just make sure that we are optimizing that model to support our operational mandate. And when I say that is, there was, as you would imagine, this is almost like a disaster response. And then when we press our victim services people into service in support of people that are impacted by disaster, rather than victims of crime per se, or violence, it's a different lens and it requires different skill sets to do that. And they did a wonderful job stepping up and doing the best they could under those circumstances. But is that the optimum role for them? And do we have to build out their skill set so that they're not negatively impacted by what we ask them to do? So it's a bit of a complex thing, the victim services part, but we want to make sure that program is doing what it needs to be doing, what we expect of it to be done. So yes, of course, Chief.
Just for the benefit of the board, and I think that's quite a profound insight, and we don't think about it a whole lot, but the victim of a fire evacuation or a flood evacuation has different needs than the victim of a sexual assault or break and enter. And often our victim services folks, and I won't speak for our partners in HRP, and I'll make a comment about the outstanding support from HRP at the end. But if this is a new norm, again, I would argue or opine or suggest that's one of the strengths of the HRM Public Safety Directorate that's being stood up, which is how do all, whether it's a community mobilization team, whether it's the strengths of all the agencies, what is the right amount of support for evacuations or people impacted with such stress and impact, which may go on for days. So thank you for that. Allowing me to make that comment on.
Great, thank you for that, Chief. Halifax Regional Detachment, as you can imagine, I guess the politest I can put it is like a huge stress test on all systems. When it comes to an emergency response, it is all hands on deck. And of course, one of the things that are principally in mind for us are the health and the wellness of our employees. Obviously, without them, we can't have an effective response. So, definitely that tested, the resiliency and the dedication of our folks for sure, and they all stepped up. But I think there's opportunities for us to keep doing better, especially on the wellness side. And some of our wellness systems are, they're relatively designed, let's call it 8 to 4, Monday to Friday. That traditional model of wellness support, but I think there's opportunities to rethink that even that when something happens, on a Saturday evening and there's an extraordinary event, how do we make sure that those programs can adapt to the circumstances to make sure our folks are always getting what they need in a timely manner, not 2-3 days later. But so we'll work internally on that with our other areas of the RCMP to try to get that work with them collaboratively to try to get those programs sort of a little bit further down the road, hopefully to serve the needs of our folks going forward. Our emergency operations plan, I would suggest, there's an opportunity here to make sure that reflects the true principles of the incident command system. I call myself a bit of a disciple of the incident command systems, because I think it's a very internationally battle-tested, proven way to respond to emergencies. And I think we have a lot to learn in there, because it brings the structures with it. Once we move through the chaos and we start applying those systems and those supports, then we get much more effective and can sustain responses much longer. So I think when we do we're currently just about through a refresh of our emergency operations plan. That'll have much more of a lens of ICS. So I won't hang up on that too much, but it'll support things like employee health and safety much more strongly. We also recognize, you've heard me talk about some of the absolute wonderful work that was done by our team internally, and we'd be remiss not recognizing that in both informal and formal spaces that way there. So we will be standing up a recognition committee that work's already underway that way, to make sure that folks understand that we recognize the work that they've done, and that it's appreciated, and that they get the appropriate recognition for that. That work's underway. In the realm of equipment and supply management, again, I won't hang up too much on the emergency operations plan to say, other than to say the ICS, that lens with our plan will actually enhance our logistical support capabilities. There's an opportunity there to improve that. We'll also work internally on things like our occupational health and safety program as well, to make sure that those are there. You've heard me talk about the respiratory protection policies, those things, to make sure that we're always at the leading edge of looking after our people in a timely manner. So we'll work internally on that. Again, back to our emergency operations plan, like the financial protocols, we did a pretty good job on that, but I would say in the chaos, some of that stuff, we don't dot our I's and cross our T's all the time, but we can get better at that. With proper structures, we can model that a lot better. So that's one of the commitments, and you'll see training and exercises there. Not to keep rehashing the incident command model there, but we will continue. Our commitment is to continue to build out our competence, our capabilities, our training, and our skills in ICS, because I think that also connects us to our partners. And when I was working in HRM before, I very much relished the ICS philosophy for ICS, because I believe it connects you to all the different parts of the operating environment, whether it's fire, whether it's water, whether it's public safety. This is how you begin to start talking all the same language pieces, and make sure the communication is effective there. So we'll keep moving through that to build that capability. Business continuity, I think there's an opportunity there also to revisit through our business continuity planning, making sure that our detachments, Tantallon in particular, was impacted by power outage, I think over a fair number of days, making sure we've got plan in place, whether it's emergency power on site or whether there's a bump plan to another detachment. We got to make sure that we're staying effective in supporting the community and our people that way there. So one of the last pieces on that one was we were going to do a feasibility assessment of whether Halifax Regional Detachment should have its own mobile command post. Now, we have a provincial resource that we can press into service, but if there's competing interests on that command post, depending on what's going on, we don't really have an immediate bump plan for that. So having that resource and controlling it might actually be more effective for us. So we'll assess that and determine whether that's viable. So this gets me to next steps, and I'm promising I'm not going to pull much more air to the room here shortly, but our commitment, we're absolutely committed to working internally and with our partners to optimize our interoperability, enhance that collective response to large-scale incidents. That's sort of our grounding foundational statement, but we need to take the actions to improve our emergency responses, right? And make sure that stuff is actually implemented, and that's part of my role. That work is underway, and there's more to follow, and it's all grounded in what it is an improvement plan with identified themes, and then owners of those themes, and then timelines to get those implemented. So there's some tracking and accountability on that internally. That's on me. I'm leading that. So To support that continuous improvement model, the HRD superintendent, and if it's not me going forward, will continue to own that. That role will continue to own that improvement plan to make sure that our response capabilities stay as strong as possible and really mitigate any issues in those future responses. So, concluding comments. I talked at the front end about the impact to the community, and that's really something we just can't never lose sight of. A significant amount of property damage and people impacted. An extraordinary event for HRM. I think everybody in this room, I'm sure, has been impacted in one way or another. But for us to I would say morally as an organization, it's for us to demonstrate that although we acknowledge we've had some successes, we've got room to improve. And it'd be hard to look at one of these things and think that we've ever done a perfect job. And we have to understand that we have areas where we can keep moving, and then we got to be thinking with that mindset. So that superintendent, that senior operations officer's role is to keep leading that and to track those improvements and be able to actually articulate it and really come back and show you how we sort of learned from that. And the commitment is really to make sure that our stakeholders, the board, is informed of that progress, and working very closely with our public safety friends in public safety, our Halifax Regional Fire folks, HRP, and our other key stakeholders that way to make sure that our collective response to emergencies and HRM is always effective. We'll play our part in that for sure. So I'll kind of leave it there. I'll leave it and bump it over to the chief for his final comments.
Thank you very much, Don. And before I perhaps welcome Mr. Moore to make comments, just two quick thoughts that often come to the RCMP. And one of the most frequent questions that we're faced with is, why didn't the RCMP investigate? Why didn't the RCMP investigate this? Or why didn't CID investigate this? While it's not particularly germane to the report, I think it's important to share with the board and folks listening is that different agencies have primacy of mandate. And the police folks at the table and so on and so forth, we work all the time to deconflict who's got the primary mandate to lead an investigation. And then often many of us will fold in around the agency with the primacy of mandate to support said agency. So I'll use the example of a sudden death in a house. If that sudden death in a house is non-suspicious, we might be supporting the investigation, but the medical examiners is arguably the primary party leading that investigation, and we support. In the same way, the Department of Natural Resources has a mandated investigational responsibility to lead a wildfire investigation, and they deployed experts that were on site that Chief Stubing and I were engaged with, that were initiating that investigation. And as we said regularly, we are there to support. And there's much support that we have provided the Department of Natural Resources. There is a scenario that we could have led the investigation. And so very grateful that there was no loss of life, because should there have been a loss of life, then certainly both agencies, with folks like Superintendent Matthews and some of his counterparts, were regularly in the EOC of the municipality. The enforcement agencies were poised to certainly surge forward and start to treat if a deceased person was found. So when people ask the RCMP about what is the status of the investigation, I would share with the board, it's the RCMP's position that folks have to go back to the Department of Natural Resources and seek the appropriate insight from that agency. But I will share with the board there's been significant support. I'll just conclude on this and ask Mr. Moore if you'd like to make comment. But what a team lift. And you're going to hear, and the municipality will hear from some just fantastic leadership in the Halifax Fire Department in terms of their response, their lessons learned. But certainly Chief Stubing and his team were engaged with Inspector Moser and our internal hot wash, as was Mr. Moore and others. But the Halifax Regional Police was just a stellar group responding. Certainly in that first 12 hours when we were responding to evacuate homes, there were off-duty HRP members, there were off-duty RCMP officers. And I just want to acknowledge once again, Don, the professionalism and the support of your team during that event. And I hold that response is just amazing because, again, it was everybody putting themselves out to serve the evacuation of 16,000 people in hours, not days. And this happened in hours, not days. I'll turn it over to Mr. Moore because I do think it is a larger public safety response. And even this morning, I'll share with the board, some of us spoke with Mr. Moore, but even in advance of climate and the hurricane season, can we bring some of our senior NCOs to have a tour of the EOC? Can we meet with some of the senior fire department? It's that kind of positive leadership, that positive initiatives that will continue to make a difference in our posture, our joint posture for the safety of Haligonians. Bill?
Good. Thank you very much. I'll keep my comments short. There's basically 4 areas I just want to speak on. One is this after action report is one of a number of after action reports that have been out. The Emergency Management Office has published one. It's in the public domain at this point. Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency have just put theirs. That was just put out. I think it's coming back to council in near future. DNR has done some work. So I just want you to know that this is one of many that will be forming part of our ongoing discussions on how we make emergency management better, and that these aren't going on a shelf, I guess is what I'm trying to tell you. The second thing is that some may be aware, certainly the councillors, we have presented a report to council that was done by K1 Consulting in relation to some work on our emergency management program. We have adopted or are adopting the emergency management accreditation program. It is a framework for building out emergency management programming. It is North American wide. We have reached out. The only other Canadian city that is accredited is Ottawa, and Ottawa has agreed to assist us in that program. So we have a framework to be able to build out utilizing the best practices, I guess, if you will, North American wide. The third piece is that recently the Auditor General's report just brought back a report on business continuity. Basically, there was some deficiencies in the way that the municipality was working on their business continuity planning. We have accepted all the recommendations of the Auditor General and have basically indicated that we will be back to the Auditor General within 3 months with a plan on how we're going to move business continuity forward. So a lot of the work that's been done in these works will form part of that information. And then the last thing I'll say is that this is obviously, as we were doing what we were doing here in HRM, there was a additional fire in another part of the province. We were very, very fortunate to have the breadth and capabilities that we had that may not have been shared in the other parts of Nova Scotia, to be quite frank. They didn't have a professional fire service that was able to respond. They didn't have the number of people and additional police agencies to be able to respond. So coming out of that, as you're probably well aware, is there's a provincial move right now on the Nova Scotia Guard to look at bettering the response of emergencies across the province. And I can say that we're actively engaged with the province, including we have actually just seconded one of our staff people over part-time to work with them to make sure that we were in lockstep as they start to build those capabilities. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Chief. Anything more to add to your report?
No, Chair. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Any questions, should there be any?
Great. So we'll now offer the floor to members who would like to ask a question or anything on it.
I would just like to make a slight comment. That was a fantastic presentation, and thank you. And thank you for your service and time during this incident. We pray it will never happen again. Well, it was an emergency situation, and you talked a lot about safety. We look at those events and critically come up with future mitigants. Some of the few things I would love to talk about will relate to, we are now all living further down out of city, right into the bushes. And if this kind of things would occur, what are, other than ecosystem and coordination, what are the specific things that we notice could have been done or would be done in the future? And I'll give you some examples. Examples like creating additional exit roads, where roads were only one channel road to those apartments or those living places. early evacuations because fire started in certain areas? Was there any form of air evacuation? Was there any form of roll calls? Do we know who are the people living that far so that we know that no one is left behind? I'm not saying that this was not done at this time, but if we don't have them as part of our list or what we could look at in the future, being the ability of being accountable for, or being the ability to account for those who live in those remote areas will be part of our safety and would also continue to lead to zero fatality in future. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to hand this one off to the CAO.
Thank you. I'll start, and if Mr. Moore would like to add anything, he's welcome to. I might take them in reverse order. I heard the topics as emergency evacuation routes, air evacuation, and roll calls. With respect to roll calls, we have launched since the Upper Tantallon wildfire vulnerable persons registry. And of course, we cannot compel people to provide their personal information or sign up, but we have certainly been promoting it as a service available to help our most vulnerable within the communities so that in the event of emergency response, we know their specific needs and can ensure there's wellness checks in place. With respect to, when there is an evacuation, when that's occurring, our emergency first responders often wind up going door to door to make sure people have left. We don't enter into people's properties when they're secured and locked, though. Who's to say people don't hide in their basement? So there are certain things we can do and certain things we can't do. With respect to air evacuation, the whole topic of specialized tools and availability and access to specialized tools for emergency response is one of the topics that the province is reviewing under their new emergency management department that they're structuring. So there will be consideration given to resource needs across the province and where things get located at different regional emergency management offices across the province. Also, there'll be more coordination of inventorying what assets are already in place at different locations across the province. And finally, the exit route piece in emergency evacuations. Through new developments, we're taking care of those issues in terms of planning, design, and approval. But in terms of retrofitting existing, public or municipal roads, that's a broader issue. And there is a motion from council that came forward after the Upper Tantallon wildfire that led to the formation of an internal working group that's going to be bringing back some prioritization on based on information coming out of our hazard, risk, and vulnerability assessments we're doing on communities to bring back some prioritized areas of need. That wouldn't be a Board of Police Commissioners issue. That would be a matter for Regional Council.
I'll just add, in addition, one of the pieces in relation to roll call, and I would really recommend a review of the Halifax Regional Fires After Action Report. They talk about the use of technology and being able to photograph damaged houses, but also houses that were not damaged, and then geolocating. We have some work to do on being able to identify houses and getting a hold of people, because one of the things we don't collect is cell phone numbers. So so some of that is our recommendations in those that we're working on right now. The other piece that I would mention is Halifax Regional Fire has a dedicated resource now that's doing the Fire Smart program and the wildland urban interface piece around firefighting. So they brought an additional dedicated resource online to do some of that work. So there are a lot of moving parts at this point that I would offer.
If I may make one comment, Commissioner, or Chair, to the Commissioner. I think I would say something as a fellow that's kicked around in a few different places in the country. We're very fortunate that it wasn't at night. And the very first picture is the fire pattern taken from a helicopter about how that fire blew through. The exact same scenario could happen, and I think you would see a whole bunch of professionals responding to it. But there is a degree of fluidity in terms of time, date, resourcing capacity. I think we should take comfort, personally, I take comfort in the totality of how the response happened. And while there can be improvements, and I'm not going to speak for the municipality or the fire department, at least from the policing perspective, somebody on the outside, if that event happened today, may see the same degree of chaos. They may see employees stepping out, in shorts or jackets, because everybody is surging in to save lives. And in that kind of crisis moment, there is a lot of chaos. There is a lot of changing scenarios and sometimes mixed information that might not be accurate. There might be some delays, but that is sort of the nature of an emergency by its definition. So I think the work that the municipality is leading and all the police agencies are supporting, I think if it happened again, you would basically see the same scenario of professionals deploying, trying to stand up relative support groups to make sure all the coordination is effective as it can. It will never be, however, seamless or perfect because of the nature of that said emergency is always dynamic.
Thank you. Commissioner Giles.
Thanks very much for the presentations. I reflect on the fact that as I close in on 70, I recall 4 distinct fires in my lifetime. Ingramport, Black Point, probably 1966, 1967. More recently, Ferguson's Cove, about 15 years ago. And then last year, both Sable River and Tantallon. And against the backdrop of the funding that would come out of room for improvement as presented and next steps as presented, how much of that can we afford against the backdrop of these every decade and a half, every generation events, when we consider how much mainstream policing is costing us?
Chair, through you to the commissioner, and then I'll also invite the CEO or Mr. Moore to speak. So certainly in risk taxonomy, or the frequency, the impact, et cetera, and the regularity is important. So what you're saying is there's a statistically an irregular event that had a high very, very high detrimental impact. So how much do we, from a policing perspective, I would say the ideas that we have proposed are not costly. Most of the ideas for the policing part are about teaching our people this might happen more commonly. Teaching our people to be more prepared to go in and work with the Emergency Operations Center, to help our folks in CID understand that we might have to look for cadaver dogs in case there was a fatality. So much of the posture from the policing side, I would suggest, Commissioner, is not particularly expensive, but it may be time and training a commitment there, which does certainly take away from other priorities. But the functional reality is, whether it's a hurricane or a fire, one of the hurricanes last year, we had 350 calls in a 2-day period, right? So we have to imagine, what does that look like? Things like the making the police stations or police offices powered might actually be seen as more vital from an employee service delivery perspective. And again, it may not be an expensive item, but it may be making sure that there's a plug-in at the power station for a temporary generator to be plugged into that location versus actually rebuilding the building. So from the RCMP side, the law enforcement ideas on our side are not very expensive. It's more about training our people to think differently and more horizontally. And maybe I'll turn it over, because the larger questions, I think, are inherent to roads and things like that.
Thank you. In response to Commissioner Giles' question, my mind turns to the need for risk mitigation versus the acceptance of incurrence of ever increasing cost for emergency response. And I think all levels of government are thinking along those lines now, and that's evident in moves to adopt higher building code standards, higher land use bylaw requirements, increased fines and fees for the province for illegal burning, increased enforcement of our own burning bylaw, as well as the provincial fire requirements, and increased public education efforts by both DNR, the province, the new emergency management department. I'm sure we'll focus on that, as will our own community safety department be focusing on that. So I think you're going to see, we've gotten through the year of analysis and response and figuring out next steps in terms of how we improve our emergency response and readiness. But I think the next phase beyond that is deeper dives into ongoing risk mitigation.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anyone else singling.
Do you want to get rid of this one and then run in camera?
No. Break. Okay, so thank you, Chief, for that. Thank you. Is it Inspector? Inspector Mosher? I lose track of you folks. I just want to call you Dawn. Dawn. Is there another Dawn in the room? And then the Jeffs. So thank you all. Anyone who contributed to that, that's a great help. And Bill, I'm glad that I personally appreciate your mentioning the collaborative, coordination of information, lessons learned and such, and approaches with the Shelburne fire. Shelburne is my hometown. All my family actually were evacuated and at risk of loss of home. So that was tough days at that time. So thank you all for, as you said, Don, making lemonade out of lemons. And we don't always want to, we look back and see how challenging and tragic in so many ways. It is important that we remember in particular here that we lost no lives, no souls were lost, and that something good can come out of these tragic events. With that, I think we're going to take a 5-minute break. We don't have a lot in the agenda and in camera after that, but I think it's a little sticky in here, and we don't have water today. So if anyone wants a minute to refresh, we'll take 5 minutes. All righty. We're ready to start and get back to 10.3.1, and that's Halifax Regional Police Association use of the Halifax Regional Police logo. And if I could ask Vice Chair Giles as well to take the helm for this one. And I would like to put this motion on the floor.
Agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Reading pleasure. And there are some very minor materials in reference to the motion item, namely the depiction of the plaque in question and the concerns raised by the artist with respect to the use of the logo and the
Okay. I move that the Board of Police Commissioners for the Halifax Regional Municipality approve the Halifax Regional Police Associations, known as HRPA, request to use the Halifax Regional Police logo in the creation of the wooden plaques, which are to be gifted by the HRPA as retirement or promotion gifts to HRPA. So for the benefit of the commissioners and those viewing, we had a request from the president of the HRPA union from Darla Perry to get permission to use the HRPA crest and logo. It's my understanding through the chief's consultation that there is a policy 8.1 that HRP policy that indicates that there's 2 layers of permission to be had. One is for the chief to sign off on it, and one for the board. There's also a requirement that there's an indication from the request originating where the request is coming from, that the crest will be used specifically for an item, a particular kind of item that is approved by us in a way that will never be used for the purpose outside of that request. It's very specific and very detailed. And in this case, the vendor is in fact the person who will use the crest, and then the product is purchased from HRPA. Now, in this case, James White, you would see a letter related to it where he swears that he will not use it outside of this, as well sent us the picture of what it could look like in its final version, which HRPA would like to use. So we also have a sign off already, approval for this effort by the chief. And at this point, this is about our approval. The other worth noting piece is that James White also has the license for RCMP. He has had it for a while, and they utilize him as the vendor for and creator of gifts. So I think for me, I think this all is in good standing and in good hands. So I would encourage members here to support it. I think it's always wonderful when we have an association honoring the work and the service that we've had done. So did I get a seconder?
You did not.
I went way into my, okay, thank you.
Mr. Blackburn, the second.
Thank you, Commissioner Blackburn. So with that, I would ask that commissioners would consider supporting this motion.
Are there any questions or comments for the chair on her motion?
No.
Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Contrary? Abstaining? Motion's carried.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'll take the chair at this stage. We are now. Okay, so we're going to be going in camera, and often we're wondering at this stage we are just deciding whether or not everyone has to stay. And in this case, RCMP would not. there is a requirement afterwards that we need the HRP here. So if you could stick around a little bit longer, and then there's no other, just a few items, normal items on the agenda, and we'll have our meeting over with. So we're now, I need a motion to move into in camera. Yeah, we could do that. Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Giles. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Sorry.
I had a question on the minutes.
Okay, so we will not put this motion on the floor. Okay, good enough. So, we do need a motion to go in camera. Move to go in camera. Thank you. Thank you. Would someone like to put a motion on the floor to ratify our minutes?
Move.
Commissioner Giles has moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Commissioner O'Malley. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. We have a 12.2. Do we have wording on that ratification? Okay, someone like to move that? You need to read it, Commissioner O'Malley, please.
That the Board of Police Commissioners for Halifax Regional Municipality adopt the recommendations as outlined in the private and confidential report dated July 22nd, 2024, and direct that the private and confidential report dated July 22nd, 2024 be maintained private and confidential.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. And just to be clear on that one, that was item number 12.2. Now moving to 12.3, private and confidential report. And we will need, is it the same wording?
The direction, is just to adopt the direction provided during the
Okay,
All right.
in-camera and in-private meeting.
okay, we have a mover.
I'll move that we adopt the direction provided during the in-camera, in-private session.
Seconded by Commissioner Giles. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. He said aye and nay. It's not just me. That's good. And would someone like to move?
Do we do?
Notice.
No, we have to do, yeah, we did the minutes.
Do we ratify the minutes?
That's right.
Yes, we did. We need, I just need to ask, are there any notices of motion? No, and the next meeting is September 4th. Is that correct? Motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.